This is Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily with Andrew Hustler Paterson and Michael Remis.
I hope you had a great weekend, everybody. Welcome to another week and another episode of Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. Andrew Hustler Paterson, Michael Remis with you. And we got a packed show today. Lots to get to coming out of the weekend. And some interesting news on the Winnipeg Jets post-draft pre-free agency, including a rather surprising name that didn't get a qualifying offer today. We'll get to all of that in just a few minutes. We will recap the draft with Shane Malloy, one of our favorites to talk about the players that were available to NHL teams. And of course, most importantly for Winnipeg Jet fans, Rutger McGrory, Brad Lambert, and the other of the Winnipeg Jets selections. I'm also looking forward to getting his take on the first round and what he made of Shane Wright's fall to 4th overall in the Seattle Kraken. So Shane's going to join us in about 20 minutes or so, and then we'll have an extended chat with our good friend Jeff Hamilton of the Winnipeg Free Press at the latest on the Winnipeg Jets offseason with him, and of course discuss another big win for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers Saturday night in BC. Listen, it was a great weekend. That was certainly the highlight of it, seeing the Bombers do what they did to British Columbia after the hype and the expectations going into that game, and the fact that the Bombers, for the first time in a long time, were underdogs. So all of that coming up on the program today. I do want to thank the sponsors that make this program happen each and every day before we get going, including our friends at Culligan Water, Royal Sports, Manitoba Battery, F Apparel, Wallace & Wallace, Aikens Lake, Vita Health Fresh Market, Breezy Bend, of course, Not Auto Corp, Little Brown Jug, Princess Auto, Boston Pizza, the Nick and Nicky DQ Group, Assiniboia Downs, Canadian Club Whiskey, and Coolbet Canada. Let's get Michael Remis in here. Remo, did you stop by Nick and Nicky DQ for a little vanilla soft serve on Sunday after that beatdown on Saturday night?
How could I not? What a performance by the Bombers. And it started off with a bang. Janarian Grant with the kick return. I gotta be honest, pretty nervous heading in. But how could you not have a nice cone after that win, after Sales called the Bombers offense vanilla? And to be honest, I was kind of worried about BC. Their offense was rolling, dominating. Now they were dominating the Argos and the Elks and the Red Blacks, who are among the worst teams in the league, and they hadn't quite played a defense like the Blue Bombers. But yeah, you got to celebrate after that one. What a performance for the Bombers, showing everyone in the league that they are still number one on whatever imaginary power rankings you want to come up with, and shoving in the face of everyone except your guy Pat Steinberg on CFL.ca, who picked against the Bombers. So
shout out to Pat. And I have to give Lefty Carroll on Twitter some props, who posted the picks and had the one W and just added RONG for a nice little wrong slate row for all the prognosticators that decided it was BC's time and not the Blue Bombers. I mean, what a performance. And as I said, I know we're going to get into some more Jets talk, and there's some sort of breaking news on the qualifying offers, but kind of hard not to start off with discussing that win right out of the gate, Remo. And yeah, there it is. If you're watching on YouTube, that's a little quick social media masterpiece right there by Carroll. And only my guy Pat Steinberg knew, don't count out the champs just yet. And I have to say about this game, you mentioned the start with Janneri and Grant. I mean, an absolute dream start with special teams, putting the team up 7 right away. I thought the defense balled out. I mean, throughout, there was obviously a couple, mishaps in the secondary. Winston Rose and Nick Taylor getting burned on long touchdowns from Nathan Rourke. What an arm he has in the first half. But overall, I mean, Jackson Jeffcoat, Willie Jefferson getting to the quarterback, making life miserable for Nathan Rourke. I mean, they did the job. But maybe the best thing overall, Remo, I think, for the game, as well as the way things look going forward, was the running game. I tweeted this out after the first quarter. I mean, Brady Oliveira, Johnny Augustine, they got the job done behind a motivated offensive line. And the Bombers had more rushing yards in the first quarter on Saturday than they did the entire game against Montreal and Toronto, last Monday. And I have to say, I mean, once they were able to do that, Zach Collaros put on an absolute clinic, picking apart the British Columbia defense over and over again. Some acrobatic throws, a Mahomesian, diving throw, Dalton Schoen stepping up and becoming an incredibly reliable target for Zach Collaros. Top to bottom, an incredible performance by the blue and gold, but one that I think the tone was really set by the reemergence of the Bomber running game in that first quarter.
Yeah, the running game, the defense, the offense. I mean, everything was clicking. They came in on a mission and wanted to show the rest of the league, hey, we're still the defending champs. Watch out for us. Jeffcoat, as you said, interception. Rutledge, interception, a forced fumble. Demario Houston, he was all angry that last week's interception got returned. Or I guess Monday is technically the same week, but it got overturned, and he made sure he got that grab to seal the game at the end for the Bombers. I mean, the Lions, they took out all their starters. They took out Rourke at the end. The game was done.
They tapped out.
They basically tapped
out.
They basically tapped out. And yeah, Dalton Schoen, we had heard about him all preseason from Willie J and guys who covered the team. And he stepped up without Dembski, 8 catches, 117 yards. He's become a bit of an end zone target, two TDs. Ellingson, he's really fit in well, 98 yards, seven catches, 1 touchdown. But Greg McCrae filled in for Dembski. He was doing it on the ground and through the air. He 3 rushes, 27 yards. I mean, Oliveira and Augustine also, did what you said earlier. And then McCrae in the receiving game, 32 yards on 3 catches. So everyone was chipping in. Mark Leggio, he missed the 2 when the game was over, but he made them.
That was just to give us something to talk about.
Yeah.
The kicker watch is back on after a rough half for Mark Leggio, and the Bombers only winning by, 21 as opposed to 27 or 28. That reminds me of last season's storylines. Well, they won by 25, but the kicker did miss 2 field goals. So,
and I want to say this, coming into the week, the Bombers were underdogs, shockingly. We now know that was wrong. But I think it was rightfully so. You look at, they played Monday, had a short week, crossed 2 time zones, from the east to the central, back to the west. They had a number of injuries. Kyrie Wilson hurt, Dembski hurt. I mean, Alexander's still hurt. You had injuries in training camp. I don't think you've ever heard any excuses all week from the Bombers, complaining about what a tough opponent they had, complaining about the travel schedule, complaining about injuries, complaining about the short week. You didn't hear any of that. And all you ever hear from Mike O'Shea is confidence in any player who steps on the field. I mean, Drew Brown comes in week 1. Oh yeah, I had total confidence he was gonna do that.
Of course he was gonna come off the bench, having never really played, and win the game for us.
So full credit here to the Bombers and the coaching staff. They don't use any excuses. They come out and they just win football games over and over again. It's incredible to watch. And yeah, I had kind of doubts about Zach Collaros. Maybe they were a bit vanilla the first, couple games of the season, but he was absolutely incredible. As you said, Patrick Mahomesian, the way he moves in the pocket to find open guys and just puts it where only they can catch it. So, 288 yards, 3 touchdowns, no picks. I don't want to say it was a perfect game because we just talked about the 2 missed field goals at the end when it was over. But I mean, it's about as close as you can get in all facets of the game from the Bombers.
Yeah, it was. That was an absolute statement game. If anybody thought that the Bombers had sort of loosened their grip as being the team to beat in the Canadian Football League, run the tape back and watch Saturday night's game again, and you'll realize that it is it's the Bombers. Hey, Ric Flair always used to say, to be the man, you got to beat the man, and the Bombers are the man, and no one's beat them yet. That being said, we do get back-to-back games of undefeated teams. What a shout out to the CFL schedule maker. I mean, we had this incredible primetime game on Saturday night, and now Friday here, IG Field, Bombers and Stampeders battling for first place in the West. It is going to be awesome. And I mean, unfortunately, the Bombers don't play a lot at home over the course of the 2 weeks ago. I think they're only once in about 6 weeks. So this is the game to be at, folks. Hopefully the weather will be nice. We'll get rocking in that Princess Auto tailgate zone a couple hours before the game, and then bring it when the Stamps and Bo Levi Mitchell take the field along with the Grey Cup back-to-back champions at 7:30 p.m. I just want to get back to what you said about O'Shea, Reem, because I had a couple people that had said, at what point do we start talking about Mike O'Shea amongst the all-time greats in Blue Bomber history? And I said, that time has passed. We're already there. I mean, winning the back-to-back Grey Cups has already put Mike O'Shea in rarefied air amongst the greatest Bomber coaches of all time, along with Bud Grant and Cal Murphy. I don't think you'd have a hard time, pressing that there's anyone else in the conversation, albeit, Mike Riley had a nice run here as well, and Dave Ritchie. But what Mike O'Shea had done, and so much more than winning games, it's the culture that he's established. And, listen, I don't want to go back to a certain former Winnipeg Jets head coach, but to your point, Reem, for a long time, it seemed as if there was, everything was against the home team. And, look at this schedule. We're traveling so much. And it's almost like they were putting forth excuses before the games happened in somewhat of a self-fulfilling prophecy. That was the one thing I always loved about Barry Trotz was the fact that, after the fact of this season, they said, well, yeah, it was a pretty tough run. But, during that 13-game road trip and not having a building, he wasn't making any excuses. You really can't do that, or else it just gives you reason to let up and not win. And the Bombers are quintessential winners right now. And you can say all you want about the 4-0 record. They could have been better. There were some things that weren't bad. Winners win. And this is all they do. And it brings me back to Zach Collaros. I know they were showing that his record, Remo, as the starter of the Bombers, was 16-2. It's really 16-1 because that second loss was a game that he started, and then they pulled all the starters, and the Bombers had first place clinched basically a month left in the season, so they wanted to get him in a game. But the bottom line is Zach Collaros has lost one meaningful football game since becoming the quarterback of the blue and gold. And it's a treat to watch. It's such an incredible turnaround from those 29 years without championship football here. And I got to tell you, if you didn't think that the Bombers were going to be a real threat to three-peat, you're probably rethinking it after seeing what they did to BC on Saturday night.
Yeah, I mean, they don't lose with Zach Collaros at quarterback. This last stretch, even with the break of the pandemic, I mean, they're still on. They've lost guys. They've replaced them. And I would put them at the top of the league. I think it's going to be a really tough test on Friday. I was very down on Calgary to start the year, but they seem to have picked it up here with the Bo Levi Mitchell to Malik Henry connection. Now, I think the tiers of CFL teams, I think it's the Bombers, then a Gap, then I guess the Lions and the Stamps, and then I'll put Saskatchewan in there too. But then there's a big gap after that. So that's my power rankings as we head in. I think this is going to be a big game. I haven't looked at the line. We'll have to talk about it later. I can bring it up right now.
Trust me, the Bombers aren't going to be underdogs again.
They're favored by 4.
So I hope everyone took advantage of a nice juicy number on the money line for an undefeated team that never loses. Say thank you very much. We don't need to complain that they're underdogs. We say thank you, and we cash tickets, and we move on to the next date.
Yeah, so I'm going to be there at IG Field. I looked at the weather. It's supposed to be very nice and sunny. I think it's going to be a beautiful night. So I think that'll be – we've had some great games, a lot of points the last couple of weeks. I think this is going to be another good one here at IG Field.
Yeah, get those tickets, folks. Cannot wait to get out there on Friday night, and we'll see. Maybe we'll see if we can maybe scrounge up a pair or two and do a little WST giveaway a little later on this year. One CFL bit before we sort of transition over to the National Hockey League stuff. This Garrett Marino I know a number of people are wanting takes on the from me on the in the chat. This is garbage. This is absolute garbage. This guy, to so obviously low bridge Jeremiah Masoli, to take him out low, injure him, and then the reaction afterwards, which was, I think, pissed people off as much. Sometimes, you'll have a play that, and guys do get hurt, but to celebrate the way that he did, and then to hear the comments of some of the other players after the game, the disgust they had. And I'd imagine much of that is felt in the Saskatchewan locker room as well. Now, there's been no decision yet at this point. We heard the panel unanimously come together in their condemnation of Marino. And I really do think, football, it's a short season. Being suspended games is significant. You lose game checks, and it's a massive part of the season. But I would like a significant multi-game suspension to this guy. It's the right thing to do. It sets the right precedent, because that is garbage that you don't need in the Canadian Football League from a fan standpoint, but especially as a player. We know how vital and how precious those careers are. That could end one.
Yeah, the hit pretty dirty, lunging at a quarterback's leg like that. I know that it is tough to hit a quarterback. You can't hit him high, and you can't hit him low anymore, but I think you can forgive that. You can't forgive the celebrating after taking a guy out for an extended period of time. So, that's so blatantly taking a guy out and then celebrating with the crowd. It's not right. You don't do that anymore. We're all people here. We're all playing a game. And, when you're ending a guy's, I don't want to say end of season, he's probably going to be able to come back towards the end. But the high-fiving and, going like this to the crowd, it's pretty gross. And
Bush League.
It's
absolute Bush League. What was that video game? Mutant Football?
Mutant League Football? Yeah.
That's Mutant League Football.
So, yeah, so about being, you're all competitors, but you don't want to literally take a guy's leg out and then celebrate it. You don't do that. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah. That being said, the power of the Canadian Football League is all in the West right now. We'll talk a little more Bombers with Hamilton when he joins us later on. And then after Jeff's on, a little bit of a preview for the next couple days with free agency. Wednesday's going to be a busy day. We probably will expand the program and go a little longer with things beginning at 11 a.m. We'll confirm that tomorrow as far as our planning time. But again, what is a great plan to do for all of you, especially those of you that join us on YouTube, make sure, that you're subscribed to the channel, hit that red button, and turn your notifications on. Because on days like certainly last year with the trade deadline with free agency, we'll often do an expanded show and get on the air before our normal 1 o'clock start time. So if you have the notifications on, you'll get a little note on your phone saying the boys are live. Get in there, and we'll be doing that. So I'm looking forward to free agency for sure, and I'm very much looking forward to talking to Shane Malloy about the Jets draft. Rutger McGroarty, Brad Lambert, the top two picks, as well as the rest of the Jets selections. But Remo, before we get into that, when Shane joins us, we should talk on the qualifying offers. And no real surprises on the guys that got them, except one that didn't, in Evgeny Svechnikov, who was not qualified by the Winnipeg Jets and is going to be a UFA once again.
Yeah, that one was a bit of a surprise to many, Hustler. I thought Sean Reynolds put it nicely, but here's the Jets. They put a qualifying offer to retain all these guys' rights. And who they sent qualifying offers to: Appleton, Dubois, Gavanke, Gustafsson, Harkins, Kovacevic, Malat, and Vesalainen. Now, Vesalainen he's going to play in Europe, but they extend him the offer so you can retain his rights.
Just keep his rights.
You just keep his rights. So they didn't extend one to Svechnikov. He came here, started hot on the line with Dubois and Connor. Then he kind of bounced around the lineup. He took some unsportsmanlike penalties, then mouthed off to the refs, when he was the recipient of bad calls. But I thought, overall, he was definitely a productive player, and at close to Min's salary. I thought he was definitely a value contract. We had a lot of questions going into the season about him, like, why would Detroit let this guy go? And and I'll bring up Rennie's tweet. I think it's surprising based on the play, but I think there's something about him, the coaching staff who's no longer with the team, but maybe it extends to management, didn't like about him. They wanted to move on, or maybe he wanted to move on from them after getting jerked up and down the lineup.
For the record, this does not necessarily mean that he's not coming back. This happened with Joe Morrow a couple of years ago, where they didn't offer Joe Morrow a qualifying offer, and then they still signed him. So before we completely say that it's done and we hear from the Winnipeg Jets on this and see what happens in the next couple days, I'd caution people from the scorching hellfire and brimstone tweets until you actually know what's happened. I'll be honest, I was surprised. I just assumed that would be automatic, that you would qualify the guy, keep his rights, and see what happens. But again, maybe part of it is the fact that the Jets realize we've heard so much talk about the bottom six. Maybe they're making a significant push to, identify different players for some of those roles in the bottom six over the course of the next few days, and didn't want that roster spot taken up. I mean, I'm really speculating. It'll be interesting to see what Hammer says about that. And this will be a topic we'll sort of hit over the course of the next few days. But that name did stand out. I mean, considering the fact that he was pretty serviceable at times last year, I thought we saw the law of diminishing returns in the second half of the season. But again, I mean, we're not talking about a $3 or $4 million player. We're talking about a guy that was basically around league minimum. I mean, he didn't even have an NHL deal throughout last summer. He signed with the Moose and then ended up getting a contract once the season started. So, I will admit I'm surprised at that, but as I said, I wouldn't completely slam the door on this until we sort of hear from the Winnipeg Jets and see what happens in the next couple of days.
Yeah, we'll wait and see what happens. But this was our conversation all last summer. We couldn't figure out why Steve Yzerman, who's one of the top GMs in the league, would let this guy who's a former first-round pick, 19th overall in 2015, why they would let him go. He signed here. 72 games. He had 7 goals, 12 assists, 19 points. Really, I think he played on probably every line throughout the season, played with different line mates. We talked about how him, all season, I don't know if you knew this, Huss, but him and PLD, they played in junior together. That came up pretty much every week, I think. Well, I thought he was a productive player. Maybe they, try to bring him back at min salary, don't want to deal with all that qualifying offer stuff. But it seemed like it would be minimal increase, but for a team up against the cap, every dollar you're saving counts if they do bring him back. But I don't know. It just seemed like there was something about him they didn't like. Maybe it was the same things that happened in Red Wings organization. Again, this is speculation from me. But you see, how he was used on the team. Here, Rennie, this was Rennie's tweet. I could have put it pretty nicely. He said, "It's surprising. He showed himself to be a useful player up and down the lineup. That said, the way he was utilized suggested he was not a coaching staff favorite," which is a lot nicer than I had said it to myself when I saw the news. But it's a different coaching staff. But again, same management. So maybe there was something going on. I don't know. I'm not there.
I think we do have to acknowledge that there could be things behind the scenes that, may have impacted this decision. I'm not suggesting. I know nothing. I'm not couching things like sometimes people say, oh, there's rumor. I have no idea. But when you have a player that was relatively productive, making so little that all you have to do is qualify and then maintain the rights, and you don't do that. I mean, maybe there is something more to it. I'll say this. He seemed to be popular with his teammates. I mean, this wasn't a guy that didn't fit in and didn't, wasn't a part of the team or anything like that. I mean, far from it from my perspective. But again, there could be more to this beyond. And as I said, much like the Joe Morrow situation a few years back, just because someone didn't get the qualifying offer does not necessarily mean that they're not in the plans. And, the Jets could have had conversations with the agent already, or Svechnikov could be done and could be signing somewhere else in a couple days when unrestricted free agency gets going, much like happened last year, although it took him a heck of a long time to find a deal.
Yeah, shout out to the chat. I see some comments here that are saying he should be extended solely for his mic'd up videos. Shout out to the Winnipeg Jets social media team. Miking up Evgeny Svechnikov, some of the more entertaining videos of the year. Him, talking to himself during the game, dancing, whatever he was doing. We did enjoy that. So those will definitely be missed.
Yeah, well, Svech, I know a lot of people were huge fans of his. He was a guy that, to be honest, sometimes drove me a little crazy because that there's the talent there. There's the reason why he was the first round pick. And at times you saw him really engaged and making a difference. And then at other times it wasn't happening. Now, part of it might have been usage. I mean, he did play quite well up in the top 6 when he had a chance earlier in the season. I think, as I mentioned before, we sort of saw limited results later on as things went down. And, at times he wasn't, along with a number of other individuals that were playing in the bottom 6, not particularly effective. But a big part of that was the amount of time that they were on the ice. I mean, I don't know how you can really expect any of the fourth liners in the Jets last year to be particularly effective when you're playing 4 to 5 minutes a night and you're getting a shift or two a period. I mean, that's a tough grind. But listen, if they don't feel that he's in their plans going forward, they've got other guys that they've either targeted in or feel that they're moving in. We'll see how it happens. But we all remember walking away potentially from a guy that, and we talked about it all last year, he was found money. I mean, he was one of the pleasant surprises of the season last year, especially in the first half, with the way that he sort of fit in the team. And you think, like, how the heck did they get this guy for nothing, a former first-round pick that had just been allowed to walk by Steve Yzerman of all people? I will admit, like many people, I'm sort of thinking, okay, when's the other shoe going to drop? Because this guy seems to be fun. He's a good teammate. He's playing well. Why the heck was he even available for nothing in the first place?
Yeah, and that's what we were saying. And I'm not sure what Yzerman knew. He's usually not a guy who makes poor decisions as a GM, but I mean, it's not like he was, top player, 19 points in 72 games. I mean, he was fine, and I guess they figured they could maybe find a player can give you the similar production for a similar price, who's more of their type of player.
Now, there'll be some talk about Evgeny Svechnikov, which raised a few eyebrows. What is going on in Chicago right now is absolutely ridiculous. Dylan Strome not given a qualifying offer. And this was a guy, I had brought him up. I think we were talking with Ken a few weeks ago, thinking that maybe he was a player that would have been available for the Winnipeg Jets in some sort of a trade. I didn't really think that a guy that was the 3rd overall pick by the Coyotes in 2015 would be given away for nothing. He had 22 goals last year. He had 48 points in 69 games playing on a terrible Blackhawks team. That's not worth qualifying? I mean, to me, even if he's not in your plans going forward, how is there not a suitor or a trade? Now, I guess he would have to be qualified at, I believe, 3.6. So maybe that was a little too much based on his production. Although, I mean, look at those numbers. For a younger player at 48 points in 69 games, I would say that 3.6 might be a bargain by those numbers, just points and assists. Obviously, there's much more in the game than just simple stat line. But that was stunning. But it's not stunning when you consider the way they are tearing everything down. And really, right now, Remis, it's essentially Seth Jones, Patrick Kane, and Jonathan Toews, the last men standing in the Windy City.
Yeah, I'm really sad about what's going on here in Chicago. It doesn't seem right to me. A team so openly, and Steve Weiner uses hashtag bottom out for Bedard or bottoming for Bedard. You trade away Alex DeBrincat, who seemingly would be a young scorer you could build around. Dylan Strome, you don't give him a qualifying offer. You're buying out. Today they bought out Brett Connolly, who I actually forgot was in the league, and Henrik Borgstrom, defenseman. And the only players there are Seth Jones, who you gave up assets for last year and signed him to this mega contract, and Kane and Toews, who've been there since the Stanley Cup days. It just seems sad that Chicago isn't trying at all to win. I think it's insulting to the fans. It makes a joke of the league. And as far as Connor Bedard goes, you have a 20, 25% chance of getting him? It just doesn't seem like an optimal thing, but, if it works out, then sure, we'll call them geniuses but it just seems wrong. Having said that, you have Arizona and Chicago not trying to win, and the Jets are in their division. I mean, that's 2 teams you should be finishing ahead of in the standings pretty much automatically, so that's good. But as far as, competitive balance and trying to have a, well-run league, seems seems dumb and seems insulting, and it seems wrong. And you see this in baseball where some owners don't even try to win. They take that revenue sharing money, put it in their pocket. They're spending nothing on players. I don't like it, and I'm not sure what the reaction here is out of Chicago. I saw not positive. I think City of Chicago posted on the Blackhawks Instagram comments L after the DeBrincat trade.
City of Chicago, yeah. That's right.
What happens? So what happens now with Kane and Taves? Like, if you're there, like, do you want to be there anymore? A team you've gone from 3 Stanley Cups, perennial contender, to not even trying to ice a competitive lineup? I mean, these guys have to be on the way out somehow. I can't see them sticking around.
Well, how do you move Jonathan Taves at $10.5 million right now? I mean, I don't think that's happening. Like, look, what did he missed the entire 2021 season. He came back last year and played 71 games and scored 12 goals and had 37 points for $10.5 million. This is the last year of that deal. I mean, honestly, even if the Blackhawks retain 50% and at over $5 million listen, he would bring a lot of intangibles, but I kind of think that the aftermath of the entire Blackhawks scandal has sort of, weighed on him as well. There was a lot of guys, particularly, the players that were there, that didn't come out looking very good. I mean, this was more about management and a cover-up amongst the organization, but some of those players were there, and I think that might have, weighed on him. But he's had a bunch of issues. Now, Kane's a totally different story. I mean, Patrick Kane had 92 points last season, so the guy can absolutely play. He would immediately make any power play in the National Hockey League fundamentally better, and a good power play potentially lethal. And he's got one more year of at 10.5. Now, I know there was some interest from Colorado last year, and wouldn't he look? I mean, can you imagine adding Patrick Kane to that operation in Colorado? But the salary cap is a real thing, and I hate to say it for Kane's sake, but I have a feeling that it might be more likely that he actually has to play through the first 55 games of the season to the trade deadline, at which point most of his salary would have been used up for the year. And at that point, teams might actually be able to take on the salary for the remainder of the season in the playoffs. But I don't think there's any way that Patrick Kane plays game 82 of this upcoming season and finishes his contract as a Blackhawk. But I certainly think that Jonathan Taves probably does, just because the demand for his services at this point and the price tag that comes with it, going to make it for a very difficult deal for Kyle Davidson to pull off.
I'll pull up their roster right here as of now on Cap Friendly. It's not all you have Kane and Taves. Now, those guys are keeping you over the cap floor, and then they signed Tyler Johnson. Was that last year? But this roster is so not NHL caliber, if I can say that. So we'll see how this plays out. I don't even know what they're going to do in free agency to fill out this roster. What happens to the rest of these guys?
Well, what about Seth Jones?
Yeah.
They traded for him last year and signed him to that extension that hasn't even kicked in yet. He's got 8 years at 9.5 a season starting next year. I mean, if they're going to be losing for the next 3 seasons or 4 seasons, does it make sense to have him there? It really is stunning what is going on right now. We'll have to get Mark Lazarus on at some point soon. He's got, some really interesting tweets about this. And by the way, another weird little bit of business from the Blackhawks. They hired Luke Richardson last week as a head coach. Derek King, who was their interim head coach last year, today announced as an assistant coach with the club. So essentially, imagine going through the coaching search, hiring Rick Bowness, and then Dave Lowry being the assistant coach. That's basically what just happened in Chicago as well.
You think he was invited to apply for his job again?
Probably. And for sure he would have been.
Seems odd. So, congrats to him for, getting another job. So we'll see what happens. Huss. The Blackhawks seems rough shape.
Yeah, here's this tweet from Lazarus that I wanted to mention, just kind of wrapping up, because the Dylan Strome thing is what, I mean, listen, they didn't get enough for DeBrincat. That made no sense. But this was something else. Strome averaged nearly a point a game over the second half of the season as the number one center between DeBrincat and Kane. His qualifying offer would have been $3.6 million. And then Lazarus goes, we have no idea what to do with the talented, productive player and well-liked teammate. The Chicago Blackhawks stories. And then he goes on to say, tanking is a scourge on pro sports and should not be rewarded. Not that they were the first to do it, but the Cubs winning the World Series needed to kick it into overdrive, gave everyone else the cover to do the same. And we're going to talk a lot about Connor Bedard over this entire season, but I will say this. I mean, even if you are the worst team ever and finish last, I mean, you could easily be picking third or fourth in the draft. I mean, there's no guarantee. I mean, the McDavid-Eichel year where Buffalo completely bottomed out, that was essentially worth it because you, by being the worst team in the league, you were guaranteed one or two. They've since changed it twice, and now you've got like a 25% chance of getting the first pick, and you can pick anywhere in the top four. If you got four Bedards, sure, but there's one right now. And to run your franchise into the ground for multiple seasons based on a pick, that's a heavy, heavy risk. And I'll say this. I, like many people around the hockey world, don't know if Chicago knows what it's doing. All I know is you can pencil in a W for most teams when they're going to Chicago or hosting the Blackhawks next season.
I think that just means that the 9 p.m. game here in Winnipeg against Chicago on a Saturday night will be even more rowdy than you thought. That was as we got the schedule last week. I believe that's who they were playing, right?
BA is in chat. Tanking is not a thing. Well, what exactly is this, BA? What? How would you describe what's going on with the Chicago Blackhawks right now? Because if that ain't tanking, then you're right. Tanking is not a thing because this is the blueprint of how to make a team horrible and lose as many games as possible.
Yeah, I mean, they're not trying to win. It's pretty beyond obvious to everyone. So whether or not it works out, we will see. I'm also, we'll also see this week has a big free agent week coming up. So,
well, no doubt. So are we out with Shane Malloy? Is this not happening today?
I'm trying to get in touch with them. So we'll see. Maybe we can do it later in the show. We got Jeff coming up in about 10 minutes here.
Perfect. Well, we'll hope to do that. And fingers crossed, we're working on a special guest for tomorrow. Someone that we would have been talking about with Shane Malloy, and that would be Rucker McGroarty. So as soon as we have that confirmed, we'll let you know. I have not been as excited to talk to a Jet prospect in a long time. I mean, as we mentioned on Friday, the electricity that this kid was emanating at the draft and afterwards all over the Jets social media was really fun. I can't remember someone outside of Patrick Laine that seemingly connected with fans so quickly than Rucker McGroarty. And I think most people probably weren't even familiar with the name before he was selected on last Thursday night. But both he and Brad Lambert will be here. And actually, one interesting bit, I should get to this because I've had a few questions. Normally at this point, this would be the Winnipeg Jets development camp, and there's plenty of development camps happening around the league. But the Jets actually are not having one this year, and it's the first time in a number of years that they haven't. Shout out to my buddy Kenny Weeb, who was transcribing some of Kevin Cheveldayoff's quotes and fired this one over to me. This is what Chevy had to say about it. The development camp situation is a little bit different this year. We've got a couple players who are nursing injuries that wouldn't be able to get on the ice. But we also had the ability for some players to come in for the Moose when we signed Nikkanen and Torgerson, and they were able to come in. Just with the uncertainty of the Summer World Juniors, knowing whether some of these players would be part of it and have them fly over and fly back, we decided we weren't going to have a development camp in its formal terms. It's important for these players that we draft, that they're not a part of the World Junior program, for our development staff to go see them and watch them work out in their environment. That's probably the single biggest thing now that we're able to do things differently, is getting to watch the players in their environment and make sure they're doing all the right things. So I think that sounds like Jimmy Roy and Mike Keane will be putting on a few extra miles over the course of the summer, probably much to their chagrin. But going and traveling around and getting together with these kids, getting on their programs and working with them beforehand. So no development camp, but hopefully we'll still get Rucker McGroarty on and talk to the Winnipeg Jets, first of 2 first-round selections from the draft Thursday night.
Yeah, I'm getting development camp FOMO, Huss. I'm seeing the Blues have Chris Thorburn out at their development camp. The Red Wings are doing one. I saw Nick Cronwall on Twitter talking to some players. The Sedins are at their camp with the Canucks.
Is Thorbs working for the Blues, or is he
I'm
a
not
special
sure.
guest coach?
Could be here, I'll show you the picture they put out on Twitter. So I saw that. I was like, all right, I guess it kind of makes sense. I mean, you have Perfetti and Lucius coming off injuries. You have a number of, I think, uncertainty regarding the Russian prospects they drafted last year. Maybe they just thought they didn't have enough bodies to do a proper development camp. But but as I see the tweets come out today, I'm getting development camp FOMO that we don't have one. And here's a Jets legend, Chris Thorburn. Yes, Jets alumni if you prefer.
What a beauty he was. Thorbs.
He
Shout out GST forever.
Yes. So that's what I mean. I was like, he should be wearing a Jets jersey at Jets development camp. I think he lives in the area. That was the team that he won the cup with at the end of his career. So no development camp. Unfortunate. There was a shovel day off the explanation as you just read. Thank you, Ken, for sending us that.
Oh, you know what? Hey, I've got to give some thanks to a couple sponsors here. We've gone way long at the start of it. By the way, shout out to everyone that went by our friends at Wallace & Wallace and picked up one of those free laser garage parking assists. We can tell you, and I guess it's great, just goes to show how many people are checking out the program, but they went fast.
What?
So they're all gone.
I wanted one of those.
Well, you snooze, you lose. I said it last week a number of times. You were just dealing with them. They came and fixed your garage door. So that one's on you. What can I tell you?
But that's awesome.
It was great to hear, though, and congratulations to everyone that picked it up. Of course, Wallace & Wallace are the fencing and overhead door specialist, and they are the leaders in boathouse doors. Many of you might have been on the lake on the weekend and caught it in the eye of a nice boathouse or door. Chances are it's probably one of theirs. They do it all steel, aluminum door, polycarbonate, or glass panels, and a design that's perfect for your little piece of paradise. And if you're thinking your boathouse door could use some TLC now the high water's receiving, you can give them a call to arrange for a service visit at 452-2700. Hit them up at Wallace Doors or check out their showroom on Lawson Road. The leaders in fencing, overhead doors, and boathouse doors are friends over at Wallace & Wallace. Hey, summer barbecue season is here, and Vita Health Fresh Market is an amazing spot to go. Not to mention some really great healthy items for the barbecue, including bison burgers and lean bison steaks, chicken, and more. But amazing options for entertaining, including some of the best selection of non-alcoholic drinks in the city. Vita Health Fresh Market stock with Winnipeg's best selection of local, organic, and natural groceries, supplements, and beauty products, all at great prices. Pop down and see them at one of 7 Winnipeg locations, including the newest store in Linden Ridge, and online at myvita.ca. Big cheers to the gang down at Aikens Lake. Saw a number of big fish coming out of the lake. And geez, I'm counting down the days. Less than a month. I'm going to get out there for a few days. It should be great. If you're thinking about a world-class fishing adventure right here in Manitoba, where you can be on the water in less than 2 hours from the city of Winnipeg, Aikens Lake is the spot. Check it out online at aikenslake.com or check out what's going on at Aikens Lake on all their social channels at Aikens Lake. And I'm pumped. I'm following in the footsteps of Michael Remis. I'm heading down to F Apparel tomorrow to get fitted. I've sort of put it off for a little bit, but now it's time. Got to get ready for the upcoming season. And, of course, where else would you go but F Apparel? Custom suits for men starting at just $400. The best selection in town. All the great new fabrics and options in for the summer. They've also got a great deal this summer. 3 shirts for just $210. They've got accessories, golf pants, chinos, and more. Check them out. 190 Smith Street downtown. Online, fapparel.com. All right, Reem, as I mentioned, we were talking Jets draft picks, no development camp. Today, qualifying offers. But the next couple days is going to be very interesting to see what happens regarding free agency. And we'll get into this a little bit more with Hammer coming up. But if you recall, if I'm not mistaken, I mean, it was sort of like today and tomorrow leading into free agency was when the Jets made those deals last year for Brendan Dillon and Nate Schmidt to shore up the blue line, knowing that they were going to have a tough time making it happen on free agency. And that, to me, is what's most intriguing for the Winnipeg Jets and Chevy going over the course of these next couple of days, is the fact that the UFA defenseman market is not particularly strong. There's some teams that now have more cap space that they thought they'd had before, and we will see if a member of the Winnipeg Jet blue line or two potentially finds themselves in a new locale 48, 72 hours from now via trade, not necessarily from free agency.
Yeah, we had heard the Brendan Dillon rumors last week, and there were a bunch of people in our YouTube comments saying, well, why would you trade Brendan Dillon? That's the guy we need. I think he's also one of the guys who's more attractive to other teams. The Jets need to free up, we've talked about this for a while, they need to free up some roster spots for some of these young guys to come in. Ville Heinola and Dylan Samberg have shown they're ready for NHL action. And the Jets are logjam. They have all these veteran defensemen, Morrissey, Schmidt, Pionk, Dillon, DeMello, and Logan Stanley as well. And look, they need some forward depth. So if you can shift some salary from your defense to your forwards, that would work. And at this time, I remember last year on our free agency show, we had Brendan Dillon on after the trade, and Nate Schmidt was doing his introductory Zoom call. So I do wonder if we will see some trading. I don't know. And as far as, activity, I'm not expecting the Jets, to be on any of the big names, Johnny Gaudreau, Nazem Kadri. I don't think they have the salary room. And so let's be real. I mean, teams want to sign with a contender. So, and the Jets signings are usually like, 2:00, couple hours after it passes, and it's like a depth player. One of the more significant, free agency signings was Matthew Perreault, but that was a while ago. So we'll wait and see. I think we're maybe more likely to see a trade. Will we see a Dillon trade? I mean, as much as you don't want to see him go, you do need help in terms of depth scoring. So that would be the name to watch. I know Murat was putting that out there. We'll wait and see, but I'm not expecting any big splashes here from the Jets.
One other little tidbit regarding free agency and the Winnipeg Jets from last season is Paul Stastny. Mm-hmm. And I know Elliot Friedman, I'm not sure whether this was on Friday or over the course of the weekend, but it said that, he's hearing that Paul Stastny is looking to sign with a contender. Now, they didn't necessarily say that excluded the Winnipeg Jets. And I think for Paul at his age, there'll be limited opportunities. I mean, there might be a team or two that has, very limited amount of salary cap to spend, but might have a spot for him on the roster. And there might be some other spots that might not be as likely to win the Stanley Cup that have more money for him. I still do think the Jets will take a swing at trying to get Paul Stastny back, but I think a lot of that is going to have to, it'll really rely, Reem, on what other top teams in the National Hockey League are knocking on the door for the services of a Paul Stastny. Because I think we saw last year, he still has gas in the tank and can still be a very, very important contributor on and off the ice for a good team.
Paul Stastny had a great year last year here for the Jets. 71 games, 45 points, 21 goals, 24 assists. That was the highest goal total he scored since 2013-14. He's got ties to drafted by Colorado, played for University of Denver. Would he go there on like a minimum contract, try to get a Stanley Cup? I think that would work. Was Paul Stastny going full scorched earth on his way out, just saying these guys don't care for each other, they don't have respect, and dropping the mic, see ya, I'm not coming back, or would they want to bring him back? I think a lot of fans, love Paul Stastny, a short time here as a Winnipeg Jet, parts of 3 seasons. But I don't know.
Those people in the organization appreciated what he had to say because it had to be said, and he was the guy that could say it. I mean, It just sort of brought it out in the open. I mean, there's no point beating around the bush and covering up things anymore. Look, there was a lot of problems with that hockey club last year, and we would have known it even if Paul Stastny hadn't said what he'd said. But when someone as respected a veteran as Paul Stastny drops the bombs that he did, I think was pretty clear to everyone, even ones that maybe had their head in the sand, that some significant changes were made. The irony of the entire thing is that we're here right now and not a lot of changes have been made other than Rick Bowness as being the new head coach. I mean, and hey, it'll be good for us because I think we do realize that, while free agency might not be, well, listen, it's never going to be prime time for the Winnipeg Jets. You just laid it out. I mean, both from a money standpoint, a market standpoint. I mean, it's still this team is winning championships and everyone wants to play there for a chance to get a ring. The Jets aren't going to be high on many players' lists when it comes to, free agency. But at the same point, there's so many other things that are tied into it with, of course, things like trades like we saw last year with Dylan and Schmidt. So, we'll touch on these topics with Hammer coming up. And then later on in the show, we'll sort of tee up some of the top free agents available for Wednesday's festivities here on Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. All right, before we bring Hammer in, I do want to thank our friends at Culligan Water, the water experts in Winnipeg, family owned for over 65 years in business. Softers, filters, coolers, whole home systems, drinking water systems, and citywide water delivery services, and commercial and industrial water products and solutions. Whether it's for the home, the cottage, or the office, Culligan's got you covered. 1200 Sargent Avenue, 694-5180, and online at drinkculligan.com. Man, I popped into Royal on the weekend. That's just the best store ever. But I did get a chance to see those new NHL Draft hats that we showed on the show last week. They are in whatever your favorite team is. They're available for you right now, so pop down and get them while supplies last. And of course, when it comes to merchandise, NBA, NHL, NFL, CFL, Major League Baseball, Royals the capital for that. And they've also got tons of bikes in store right now: soccer, baseball, tennis, disc golf, and more. Make the most of summer. Pop down and see our friends at Royal Sports. And of course, Donnie and the gang at Manitoba Battery are busy these days. They're the home of the $99 Deep Cycle battery. You won't find anyone in town to compete with that price. And not to mention, not only you're going to get the best price and best service from the guys and gals at Manitoba Battery, but they're going to deliver it to your door at no extra cost when you live inside the perimeter. And for you folks a little outside the perimeter, they'll still bring it for you for a small additional fee. Forget the big box stores when it comes to batteries. Shop local, get a better price, and enjoy the convenience and service that Manitoba Battery has to offer. www.manitobabattery.com, or go visit the team in the coolest JetBlue building in Winnipeg at 1026 Logan Avenue, open 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. daily. And a quick Breezy Bend golf report while we get to Jeff Hamilton. Xander Schauffele, back-to-back wins. He wins the Scottish Open. The Open Championship gets going at St. Andrews. Tiger Woods is there. Cannot wait to talk about that over the next couple days. And I guess with Wednesday being free agency, we may have to get Feinberg on the show tomorrow to tee that up a little bit. Of course, when we talk golf on the program, we do it for our friends at Breezy Bend Country Club. Talk to Corey Johnson about getting on the waiting list for next year and find out more on everything that Breezy Bend has to offer as one of Winnipeg's top private clubs online at breezybend.ca. All right, let's get the Hammer in here and get going. Jeff Hamilton joins us from the Winnipeg Free Press. What's going on, dude? How's the weekend? Ooh. Jeff, you there?
I think his connection is I muted him. His connection is poor, but we'll make it work.
There you are. Okay, hold on a sec. Hey, Jeff, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear?
Okay, perfect. Now we can hear you. What's going on?
Yeah, not much. Well, my coverage will match my connection. So good. So let's go in here.
We got a maybe you're still dealing with the Rogers outage from a couple days ago. What a gong show that was for so many people in so many professions. Hey, listen, I do want to get to the Jets story. We were just kind of kicking around the Svechnikov getting qualified, but we'd be remiss if we didn't start off talking about the Bombers and that statement win on Saturday night in Vancouver. It had been a long time since they'd been an underdog. They were playing on a short week. Yeah, they traveled all across the country. They didn't have much time to practice. You never heard that once from the team. No excuses, and they went out and absolutely dominated. I know a lot of people were worried about that game, but what a performance by the two-time champs, showing everyone that the road to the Grey Cup still goes through IG Field in Winnipeg.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can count me in the group of people who, I didn't think the Bombers were going to get pumped or anything. And, obviously I know they're a quality team, but if you even look earlier in the season, I thought that the, Saskatchewan Roughriders were going to, lay the boots to Montreal, but they were on that short week. And pretty much from the immediate kickoff, they got their asses handed to them. And it was like that for the Bombers and BC game, but it was the team on the short week that did the ass kicking. And so, right away off Janarian Grant, I mean, it got to a point. I thought, of all the things that were impressive for that game, I thought that one of the funniest things was that BC stopped kicking to Grant. I mean, they just kind of put their hands up in the air and said, our coverage unit isn't good enough. Let's quibble it, and then end up giving the Bombers. I think they end up with 3 points there before the end of the half. To get things going, or if I can't remember if it was a touchdown. Anyways, it was points on the board. So it was just pure domination. I mean, I know a lot of people are woke up the next day and was like, Nathan Rourke who, and given especially what Zach Collaros was able to do. I mean, Nathan Rourke is a great story. I mean, I think we can all get behind a Canadian quarterback having the start to the season, that he's having. And on top of that, I mean, he's a humble guy too. I mean, he ate it after the game and said, I'm not good enough for all the hype and to just kind of, rest on my laurels. I need to be better. So you have to like what you saw from him. But if you're a Bombers fan or even just a football fan, I think you gotta love what the Bombers were able to do to BC. I mean, specifically Zach Collaros. I mean, what is he, 22-2 now in games? 22-1 is the stat that we use for meaningful games, because that game down the stretch last season against Calgary did start, and I think they had the lead at halftime it away, but he was just terrific. And I think, this is really, I'm not going to say this is what we've seen from Zach Collaros week in and week out, because it's not, but we've seen glimpses of that every week. And I'm not trying to pick on a guy like Matt Nichols or anything like that, but this is a guy who's willing to extend plays with his legs. This is a guy who, you pretty much have to tear him down before he throws the ball into the stands and out of trouble. He'll try to fit balls through small windows. And I think, if you look at the big storyline leading into that game with Marcus Sayles, former Bomber, and to be clear, anyone that knows who Marcus Sayles is might be the nicest guy in the world. So it was interesting to see him be the one that fueled the trash talk. But the thing about his comments were they weren't wrong. I mean, that the Bombers were squeezing by teams. Now, complete testament to them on the, how battle tested they are and resilient they are for those, for the first 4 games, squeezing out victories and, maybe games that they had lost momentum or, even in that opening week shouldn't have won. All the credit to them. But, I think this was a statement game. I think the players did take those comments about the offense being vanilla seriously and, came in and made a statement game. And that was the game of the week this past weekend. And I think we got an exciting matchup set here for Friday against the unbeaten Calgary Stampeders too, because right now, if we've learned anything through the first X amount of weeks here, 5 weeks, it's that the West is best again. So bring it on.
Yeah, it's almost comedy right now, comparing the East and the West right now. Zach Collaros deserves all the accolades for the way that he played. He was brilliant. But I do want to point out, I really think that maybe the biggest part in the way the passing game flourished in the second, third, and fourth quarter was what the running game was able to do in the first quarter. I mean, they outrushed their total on Monday night in Toronto in the first quarter. Brady Oliveira was getting going, and the bottom line is the offensive line was moving the pile. In your perspective, how important was that performance by the Bombers in the running game early on to set up the success that Zach was able to have with his receivers as the game continued?
So I go as far as to say that establishing the running game was if not the biggest piece of the puzzle, at least very close to their success. Because if you look at how they were running the ball, they were whether it was Greg McCrae, which I think only had 1, but he had an outburst for 22 yards. He was also making some catches out of as a receiver. Of course you had Johnny Augustine get a bigger load. I know there's a lot of fans out there that want to see him, get a heavier workload, and we saw that. Brady Oliveira was also solid in what he was able to do, but most importantly, the runs weren't going for 2-3 yards. They were going for 5, 6, 7 yards, setting the Bombers up, into second and short. And as we've heard over and over, whether it be head coaches or offensive coordinators, those extra 2 or 3 yards make a massive difference when it comes to, using the playbook. When you're facing a second and third, second and 4, rather than a second and 6, second and 7, you just have a larger piece of the playbook that you can work with. And we saw the Bombers do just that. I mean, they were exercising big plays, to move the chains on those second and shorts. They were getting those yards, and, they were just really making the BC Lions defense, which we can say, I mean, even in that game to a certain degree, obviously they put up a lot of points. That's a pretty good defense, and they were a pretty good defense through the first 3 games of the season for them. So that's not an easy out, and a good secondary. So to see, players like Zach Collaros extend plays with his legs, see guys like Dalton Schoen, who's turning into, I don't want to get, too high on him too early here, but he's certainly shown a level of consistency and an ability to adjust to the game up here in Canada, that he might just be one of those big piece weapons if he isn't already. I mean, you've seen Greg Ellingson; he's been as consistent as can be. I mean, this, you got to remember, right? They're doing this without Nick Dembski, who's arguably their most versatile piece on offense, and establishing that run game was massive. And then it was essentially the most complimentary football we've seen from the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. And when we've seen the Bombers play complimentary football, we see what we saw in 2021, and that was pretty much, walking through the league, fairly easily. And while things haven't gone as easy so far this season, there's always going to be growing pains for teams early on. And if you're a Bombers fan, I mean, what we saw from the Bombers this weekend and what we've seen from them all year, the resiliency and their ability to adjust to, losing players over the off. We were right in last week. Harris was the missing piece. He was that energy, that boost that was missing from the huddle. While, fast forward a few days later in one practice and a walkthrough, and we're seeing, a bunch of guys shining. So, all things considered with the Bombers right now, I mean, they're the favorites. They're the top of the power rankings. They're the back-to-back champs, and it's hard to not look at them as a favorite, even though we're only looking at 5 games through as the favorite for a three-peat.
I'll say it, just focusing on the running game a little bit more. I mean, certainly it all starts with the offensive line. I thought they came ready to go and really, set the tone. But individually, I thought that was just a huge game for Brady Oliveira. I mean, you naturally know that he's feeling some of that pressure. I mean, he's filling the biggest shoes that ever were in the backfield of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. Many people have sort of anointed him as the next one. We know the story, another local guy, another Oak Park product. And so far this season, it had been lacking a little bit. He'd had a tough time breaking tackles. The average wasn't there. And the bottom line was a lot of times he would get the football, and then the Bombers were there in second and long, and that was sort of handling things. It was limiting what they were able to do in consistently moving the football, and it put more pressure on the defense. For him to have a game and a first quarter just setting the tone that way, it wasn't like they won the game on the backs of it. But for him personally, I'd imagine behind the scenes, it's a big stepping stone for him. Probably a little bit of a weight on his shoulders, because I'd imagine he was really feeling the pressure, especially after the matchup against Toronto.
Yeah, it's a great point, Huss. I mean, the guy's 24 years old. You know what I mean? Like, he's not, he still has very much, of his career ahead of him. We've seen glimpses of him over the last, season when Andrew Harris went down and he was able to come in and had really great showing. So, I mean, as a guy who was playing that backup come in relief role, that really suited him for where he was at in his career. I mean, it's a lot to ask out of a running back to, hammer the rock 20 plus times a week, week in and week out. Now, if you look at Brady Oliveira, I mean, he dropped 15 pounds this offseason to be able to withstand a grueling 18-game season, to be able to play. So he's still adjusting to that weight. You had mentioned the offensive line. I thought the offensive line had easily their best game. I mean, it was that vintage stuff where you had 2 or 3 O linemen carrying Brady or Johnny Augustine, and then having the 2 other linemen come in late and hammer the pile for another, 1 or 2 yards. And that's been the bread and butter of this offense for years now. And so to see that happen, but for Brady specifically, this is a guy who, he plays it calm and cool. He is a cool cat. He's got a great personality. He's a great kid. But he's feeling that pressure. I mean, he wants that pressure, to be clear. I mean, this is a guy who was pretty outspoken last season about wanting that role, and I think he voiced that in the offseason. Now, I'm not saying, I think if the big decision to make was between him and Andrew Harris, and I think if you sign Andrew Harris, Brady's looking for another football home, not because he doesn't love playing with the Bombers. He just, feels like he's in that position to take over the starting role. And, what we saw through the first couple of weeks, again, that O-line has been banged up. They've lost some key guys, whether through, the offseason and Drew Desjardins or, just having to kind of fix holes there. Obviously, Michael Couture's out. I think Chris Kolankowski is doing a great job, being that center of that line, but it was going to take time with that many moving pieces to get things going. And I think a game like that, whether it's the confidence for Brady Oliveira, whether it's confidence for Johnny Augustine, whether it's confidence for the O line or the offense as a whole, that's a really big step forward, because, as much as you like to see Zach Collaros slinging the ball and finding, receivers wide open. And, as we've seen over time, that only happens when the O line is getting the, not just the O-line, but the run game is built off the O-line. So again, I think that was a massive boost of confidence for the entire offense, and we'll see what happens here with another stiff challenge against the Stampeders this Friday. Yeah,
one other note on this game, and in some ways, I think it's probably a great segue into what to look for and expect on Friday. Certainly they'll want to continue growing that running game and allowing a balanced offensive attack that I think gives Zach more to lean on. But I'll say this, we know the cornerstones of this team, back-to-back championship teams, Hardrick and Bryant up on the offensive line, Jefferson and Jeffcoat on the defensive line, Adam Bighill, Zach Collaros. Those half dozen guys all had A games. And when those guys are leading the way, this team has a pretty damn good chance of winning week in and week out.
Well, and that's why that core's still here, right? That's why consistency is a thing that's just, celebrated. It's with the teams that have it, they love it. With the teams that don't have it, they desire it. And so, that comes with winning, right? It comes with winning, but it's more than just comes with winning. Because if you look at the Calgary, Stampeders, they were a great team for a decade. They were, they didn't get as many Grey Cups, I imagine, as they would have wanted over that stretch, but they were by far the best team in the league. But they had to lean on their scouting a lot more. Now, I'm not saying Winnipeg hasn't had to lean on their scouting, but the Stampeders would lose a bunch of guys every year because, people would chase money. The reality in Winnipeg is, they're able to give guys, raises, marginal in some cases, sometimes not raises, to guys who could go out and test free agency, who could go out and try to establish, what they have in Winnipeg in another city. But it's just how they're treated here in Winnipeg, how they're treated by, the organization, how they're treated by head coach Mike O'Shea, how they're treated, by one another, and the accountability they have. And the fact that, it's cliche, but they're all pulling in one direction. Guys don't want to leave. And, again, if you're a Bombers fan, I mean, that's a testament to not just all those things I mentioned. It's a testament to the fans. It's a testament to playing in front of rowdy fans. They appreciate that through and through. And you just get the feeling that, because of what they've been able to build, nobody wants to jump off this train. Nobody wants to go somewhere else when, they know what they built here. And I don't want to get too whatever, but Mike O'Shea doesn't have a contract for next season. So, let's, if the good times are going to keep rolling, I think you're going to have to probably find that guy a place for next season. But until then, I mean, this is the place to be. It's proven the place to be for years, and the results have been there, in back-to-back championships with a third.
Well, just you mentioned O'Shea. I mean, I kind of touched on this because a couple of people had hit me up on Twitter, and I've mentioned it before. I mean, with the back-to-back championships, Mike O'Shea had already, pushed himself into the conversation amongst the all-time great Bomber coaches. I mean, if you make it three-peat, I mean, you were right there, with Bud Grant, probably taking over from Cal Murphy. The legacy of Mike O'Shea here, and I mean, God, I don't even want to go with what you just mentioned, the lack of a contract right now. I have no doubt that he'll be a priority and they get things done. But I mean, he has been the leader. We know all the story about the stumbles at the beginning, the continued improvement. And now he is running this ship that is the class of the league right now. And, he has put himself very early in his career, relatively for coaches, into some of the best of all time, certainly amongst the best Canadian coaches ever. And I mean, that's another story that, he's so quiet for the most part, all business, does never talk about himself. But I think other people should be talking about Mike O'Shea and the job that he's done in creating what is on the verge of being a dynasty here in Winnipeg.
Yeah, the big D word. I mean, absolutely, Huss. And I mean, maybe first of all, I think Mike O'Shea has a ton of respect across the league. I think you're right. Maybe he doesn't get talked about as much as he's deserved to, but that doesn't mean there isn't other teams around the league that are all trying to copy and paste the Mike O'Shea model. Look, it's absolutely impossible, borderline impossible, to sell a rebuild in the CFL when there's 9 teams. But I'm telling you right now, if you're going to convince a fan base on a rebuild to bring in a culture and how to do things, Mike O'Shea is at the top of your list. So, I look at teams like Montreal, and I'll preface it by saying I think Mike O'Shea is coming back here. I think he'd be crazy not to. I think the situation for him is a good one here. He's a head coach. He's not a head coach and an offensive coordinator. Doesn't have other jobs. He's surrounded himself with talented people. Now, I'm not saying he couldn't pick all that up and go somewhere, or that maybe some of his coordinators, like a guy like Buck Pierce, wouldn't be, a candidate for a future head coaching job. But, and again, this is coming out of nowhere, but, you have Danny Machocha, who's going behind the sideline and replacing Kahari Jones. I mean, if you're Montreal or anybody for that matter, and you're looking to spice or change things up and give somebody or get somebody in there to do an overhaul of your roster in your locker room, there isn't a better candidate than Mike O'Shea. But, as much as he's going to be, coveted by other teams, as much as he's going to be courted, I'm sure, and he might even listen, who knows, but I just don't see it getting to that point. I don't think it can. I think Wade Miller understands the importance of Mike O'Shea to this team. I think Mike O'Shea understands the importance to this team, and all those things. It just might lead to some more other areas. And we'll see how that shakes out. And this is also one of those things where obviously he's not a lame duck coach. He's got an expiring contract, but that will all be handled in due time. And I'm sure it's something that's been talked about and will continue to be talked about. But, it would be a weird day to see Mike O'Shea anywhere else. Cause I mean, like you said, Haas, I mean, if he's not already there, he's getting up there with, the biggest names in coaching history here in Winnipeg for sure.
Well, no doubt. And just one more bit on O'Shea. I mean, just the way that he handles, every week, every practice, every game, I mean, everyone and I were talking earlier, and we always used to make fun of how Maurice used to roll out, the time zones, the schedule, and it was almost like it was a self-fulfilling prophecy at times about how hard done they were and all the things that were going forward. The Bombers would have had every reason in the book to point out the Monday game, flying from Toronto to Vancouver. It was absolutely none of that. This was another game, a big matchup. If anything, they maybe listened to what some other people were saying about them and how they were underdogs and went out and showed everyone who's boss. But it's such an interesting comparison to the way championship teams and teams that are used to winning consistently go about their business and handle it, even when they are put up in an adverse situation that might not be advantageous to their plate.
Well, and I think that, that is a testament to not just Mike O'Shea, but the leadership group on this team. I mean, this team, I talked about Calgary before, all those years for that decade that they were, cream of the crop. I mean, they would be shocked if they lost. They would win games when they weren't their best, and Winnipeg would play their best and still lose against the Stampeders. And now we're seeing those roles reverse. And I think you're seeing the power of a positive culture. You're seeing the power of, practicing those habits. We might not love the sound bites. We might not love the secrecy in some ways, but this is a team that is dialed in. This is a team that is pulling all in the same direction, whether you're the starting quarterback or you're at the bottom of the practice roster with, no chance of getting in. These guys have completely bought into the culture that has been set by Mike O'Shea and has been, maintained by the leadership group. Right. And that's why you hear Mike O'Shea say things like, I don't go into the room. This is a guy who would absolutely love to put the pads back on. There's absolutely no doubt in my mind that if Mike O'Shea could get back onto the field, he would. So for him to step aside and allow that, that's just him understanding his players. That's him understanding the CFL locker room. And most importantly, that's him understanding what needs to be in place to be a successful group. And so that when you have situations where you're on a short week, where you have situations where you only have one practice and a walkthrough to get ready for, you know, one of the more exciting teams in the league, you know, when you have a situation where, you know, everyone else on the outside is talking about how difficult it's going to be and picking you to lose, you're not even listening to any of that. You don't, you know, you're not even part of that. You all you're focused on is what you're doing and what job you have to do. I mean, you look at the post-game interviews afterwards, nobody bit at the vanilla, you know, comment except for Willie, and Willie's just that guy. You know, he's going to be one of the few guys that isn't going to let that one go, but he does it in a respectful way. The rest of the guys, you know, if you whether it was TSN interviewing them or the local guys scrumming, I watched afterwards, they didn't want to touch it. They were just, you know, this was business to them, and they're not going to think about it as they, you know, they're not going to think about the victory much longer as they get ready for this game here this week. So again, that's just constant, you know, hammering the message, constantly, you know, hammering the goal of going 1-0 every week. And it's just, again, it may not be, you know, the sexy sound bites, but that's just what this team is. They hold their composure. There's this, you know, you look at around the league, and I'll even go off a little bit more. You look around the league, what happened in Toronto with Brandon Banks on the sideline would never happen in Winnipeg. Like, it just wouldn't happen. That's just not, like, you know, or that guy would be gone. Like Mike O'Shea, I just couldn't even fathom it. I think Mike O'Shea would grab that guy. I don't even know what Mike O'Shea would do, honestly. I don't think it would ever happen. And then you look at, you know, other instances like the Marino hit. Like, I'm not saying guys can't do cheap hits or whatever, but there's a certain respect and understanding, not just for the man beside you in the locker room, but for the game of football. And that's instilled in every single one of the members of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers.
No, it's great stuff. Jeff Hamilton of the Winnipeg Free Press is with us. Hammer, hang tight, because I do want to get to some Jet stuff with you. By the way, folks, we're closing in on 7,700 subs. If you haven't already subbed to the YouTube channel, please do us a favor, completely free. Just hit the red subscribe button and see if we can get up to 200 likes. We're already over 153. Lots of fun challenges in the chat right now, so we'll see whether you guys can make that happen. Just before we do get to that, speaking of the Bombers, Friday is the game. Friday night, weather's going to be great. Get your tickets, show up for the game, and when you do, make sure you show up early for the Princess Auto tailgate party. Cheap beers, hot dogs, pop, DJ Finesse spinning, some great prizes to be given away by the Princess Auto staff as well. Definitely the place to be before Blue Bomber home games, just outside the stadium in the Princess Auto tailgate zone. And of course, Princess Auto is the spot where you'll find the best deals on the most unique assortment of tools and equipment around. Everything you need to complete the projects on your list or start something new is at Princess Auto. Visit them at one of two Winnipeg locations, Panet Road or Portage Avenue West, or shop online 24/7, 365 at princessauto.com. And I have a feeling, I joked about Remo popping by for some vanilla soft serve, but, you know, in celebrating the vanilla win on Saturday, you know where you can get the best soft serve and ice cream around. That, of course, is at Nick and Nicky DQ. 4 locations in Winnipeg and southern Manitoba, the DQ in Niverville, along with DQ Northgate, Polo Park, and St. Anne's here in Winnipeg. Grab one of those great Blizzard flavors, or maybe shout out to the Bombers and just take it old school with a big vanilla cone. Hit them up on Instagram as well at DQ Manitoba if you do want to order an ice cream cake for an upcoming party or event. Man, I did see the gang at Not Autocore. Big car show out at the Assiniboia Downs on the weekend. Looked really cool. They, of course, are rolling this summer. So many Manitobans getting into new vehicles at amazing prices with the help of the Not team. Why not get into the car of your dreams at the best price around by dealing with Not? Waverly and McGillivray, of course, online at not.ca. Pop down and see all the amazing vehicles on the lot, as well as the big selection of Tesla and electric vehicles. And, of course, we do have a big game coming up on Friday. But whenever you're thinking about getting together with the gang to watch the game, no better place to do that than Boston Pizza. Take advantage of their happy hour specials from 3 to 6 and 9 to 12 each and every night. And the delicious new summer menu, including carnitas, tacos, pizzas, and pizza flights are back as well. You can also check out their game day deals and order online at bostonpizza.com. All right, Hammer, let's get to the Jets. Before we even talk about the draft or free agency, the big news today was the qualifying offers. And I'll be honest, I mean, I'm not the biggest of Evgeny Svechnikov stan, but I thought he was a serviceable player. And I was really surprised to see that he did not get a qualifying offer amongst all the players that did. What was your reaction to that? And that doesn't make sense.
Ooh, does it make sense? I mean, look, I like Evgeny Svechnikov. I thought he played well in the roles he was handed to last season. I thought he did a formidable job for a guy who, ultimately started with the Manitoba Moose and a PTO with the understanding that he was going to sign. I mean, a lot of us, Kenny Weeb was the big Svech guy heading into end of the season, but we all kind of understood he would make it. But it's just a weird year for him. So to have a weird ending like this doesn't really feel all that weird. That's the word of the day, weird. So but I think he had an interesting season. Look, it is a little odd because I've seen some people talk about how maybe he was frustrated with his playing time, and that maybe his attitude seeped into the group, and maybe you don't want that negativity in the locker room. I don't see that the case at all. I think there was a lot of people that were unhappy with their usage last season or with their ice time, and I think that a guy like Evgeny Svechnikov brought a bit of I don't want to say a lightness to the room, but he was well liked. I mean, people had mentioned his his mic up. I mean, I remember Jets staff coming up to me after a few weeks there and being like, "This guy is like the most liked guy in the room. He's just he's a fun guy. He's a good guy to be around." All those things. I think what ultimately happened with him was trust. I don't know, and I don't know why that trust would have been damaged. Whether it was not whether he had a shorter leash. I mean, clearly had a shorter leash than a lot of other guys, because it seemed like if he didn't have a great game, he was either bumped down to the third or fourth line, and in some cases didn't make the lineup. So, it looked like he had a bit of a short leash. I don't know what played into that. I don't think it was attitude. It maybe was defensive responsibilities. Just a lot of things can happen. We were talking off air, Huss, and maybe it's kind of something similar to Ville Heinola, a guy who, you'd argue should be in the lineup, but wasn't getting the trust of the coach, and for various reasons. Either wasn't making that led to costly things. Again, I felt like Ville Heinola, unlike some of his colleagues on that blue line, had a shorter leash than most to make mistakes. However, with Svechnikov, I do think it's one of those things where he could be back. I don't see a reason why he couldn't be re-signed. I know it's a bit of a ridiculous endeavor given his qualifying offer, since he was making league minimum, would not have paid him much more than that. So it is a little bit of an eyebrow raiser. I mean, it might also be Evgeny Svechnikov's camp saying, "Look, I don't want to come back," and so maybe they have those conversations, and he'd like to test, become a UFA and test the waters elsewhere. So, or it could be as simple as, "Hey, this is the contract we want to have you at. It's different. It's maybe we want to, and teams do this. The Jets aren't, by themselves in this in any way. Is that okay? We want to pay you league minimum again, right? We'd be happy to have you at the same dollar point. If you feel like you're deserving of more or warrant more, go test the free agent waters, but know that our offer is there. Who knows if that's in play or not? But certainly when you look at the list of guys that were qualified and the two or three that weren't, Evgeny Svechnikov's a bit of an eyebrow raiser. But when you consider and take everything into consideration last season, that how he was used or wasn't used, it's not all that surprising that there might be a bit of a breakup here too.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I could see him being a guy that drives the occasional coach crazy at some point. I mean, he did take some stupid penalties, and but the one thing I'll say is that in his limited time up in the top six, he was productive. Which is more that you can say for some other guys that got on that spot for limited minutes. Mm-hmm. But the other thing is that, playing in a third or often fourth line role, there wasn't much there. But I keep coming back to the fact that, I mean, that fourth line at times played 4 or 5 minutes a game, Jeff. So I have a hard time really holding that against anyone because of just how difficult that will be. Now, if under Rick Bowness, this team is going to be going with guys in those roles playing 9 or 10 minutes a game, which certainly was the model in Dallas, maybe they feel like he's just not suited for that role. And it's a bit of a precursor maybe to a few more depth signings, if you will, specifically targeted to playing third and fourth line roles of the Winnipeg Jets coming up in a couple days when free agency gets going.
And that could very well be the case. And that would make sound sense to a certain degree. I mean, I agree with you. I felt like, in the limited time, Evgeny played well with Dubois and Kyle Connor. I've always kind of like I've always viewed the most, a lot of the most successful teams in the NHL aren't top heavy. They don't put their, six best forwards per se on their top two lines and front loaded. We've seen in the past the Jets like to do that, and they don't like to play their fourth line. I think that changes obviously with Rick Bowness, as you alluded to, and needing the fourth line to play a bigger role. In order for all things for the system to run smoothly. So I could definitely see that. I mean, the scouting report on Evgeny Svechnikov could be that he isn't as great defensively, or he doesn't pick up certain assignments, and that goes again to my comments towards trust. And so it could be as easy as good player, but not a good player for what we're trying to do this season. But I certainly wish him luck. I think he's a quality player, a quality guy from what I was able to see last season. And if he's not with the Jets next year, hopefully he has a good season somewhere else.
Now, Hammer, there was some speculation that some of the deals that maybe were going to get done on the draft floor on Friday didn't happen because none of the GMs had cell service because of Rogers. But it was a little quieter, certainly for the Jets' perspective. Heading into Wednesday, all the defensemen that were on the roster are still there. Blake Wheeler's still a Winnipeg Jet. What was your takeaway from a lack of movement at the draft? And should we be expecting something to happen sooner? Or are these trades that might take a while longer through the summer to get worked out and actually done?
I'd be curious to see just what, if any, effect that Rogers blackout had on making deals. I know the Jets had been talking with teams, as every team does. You look at, obviously Blake Wheeler was a guy that, could have been or was rumored to maybe be gone and over the draft. But I mean, with free agency coming up here, I look at a guy like Blake Wheeler, for instance, and you look at, all the kind of the top end guys that people are going after, whether they be free agents or whether they just be rumored for trade. I almost feel like Blake Wheeler will be a bit of a plan. Teams that, as we often see every single year, if only one team can get a player. So if you're banking on a certain player and you go after him hard, I mean, there's only so much money you can kind of spread around. And so I think there's going to be teams out there that don't get the guy that they want, that could use a guy like Blake Wheeler, and then maybe those talks become ramped up. I think there was. I don't know if there was opportunity per se, but I know there were chats to move up in the draft. I think the Jets are happy with who they had at first pick. I think they thought Geeky would fall to them, or at least hoped. I think there was a couple other guys that went earlier on that maybe they had on their draft board. I don't want to say like caught running around. I think that Rutger McGrody is a guy that was high on the Jets list. I tweeted out a list of names. I kind of got crucified for it. Which had him on the list. Those were guys that I was told that the Jets were coveting. And so, he ends up getting plucked off that list. I mean, you obviously have Brad Lambert, who came later in that draft. But as far as the trades go, I mean, I don't know if it was supposed to be I think it was a pretty crazy day as far as trades. I just don't think the Jets were, obviously big players in that. And I don't know if they necessarily were expected to be in at the draft. I think if the right, we all know that Kevin Cheveldayoff doesn't like to get ripped off and hasn't really gotten ripped off in trades. So he's a bit of a hard negotiator. So as is case every year when teams don't make trades or don't make deals, you always want to be that fly on the wall to see what conversations were budding and what names were being tossed out, because at the end of the day, GMs listen on every name. Now certainly there's some untouchables, but there's still a lot of things that I think if you look at, great, Remo's going to get me crucified again. But if you look at certain, I think not everyone's available. Again, there's untouchables, but I think you listen to teams and you listen to, what the opportunities are. And those things happen fast because teams are often talking to 2-3 teams at a time. And if you're not going to be quick to the draw to give away your pick. If teams want to move up or move down, then they're going to move on to the next people. So again, it's something I don't think we're ever going to find out, but it'd be fascinating to know just, what kind of calls crossed the desk before Rogers screwed things up.
Well, and speaking of deals that happen, I mean, we spent some time on Friday talking about the DeBrincat trade, which, I mean, good on Pierre Dorion. I mean, I think he got a bona fide stud, 2-time 40 goal scorer for a first rounder, a second rounder, and a third rounder. The chances of any of those players emerging to what DeBrincat will do for them, even if it's just 2 years, probably unlikely. And if things don't go well, they feel they need to trade him. I'm not sure they don't get more for him if they deal him at the deadline or next season. But what's fascinating is that Dylan Strome, I mean, everyone's up in arms about Svechnikov not getting a qualifying offer. He had 22 goals last night, was working as their number one center, playing with DeBrincat and Patrick Kane, and they didn't qualify him at $3.6 million. And I'll be honest, my biggest takeaway is there wasn't a taker for a draft pick, like a late round pick that would have taken the rights to Dylan Strome and qualified them themselves. That's a real head scratcher for me, Jeff.
Yeah, you want to do a breakdown on something? Go break down what the Chicago Blackhawks did. I mean, I know some fans don't like, the idea of Tank City or whatever, but they're essentially trying to get down to the bottom of the barrel here and fast. I mean, I thought some of the deals were okay, but I also think that you're right. I mean, if you look at what Strome was able to do last season, playing with their best players, the fact that he was qualified at $3.6 million, it seems like if you're trying to, if you're trying to build, your team, cost effectively, it seemed like, a guy like Strome would be a good guy to add to the puzzle. Now, this would be pure speculation, but I mean, there's obviously a reason for why they didn't. And, whether that would be, negotiations being stalled or having to pay him more or whatever it might be, maybe it's attitude. Maybe this is a guy you don't want around. Maybe it's not necessarily attitude, but practice habits. Maybe there's all these things that come into play that if you're really trying to, if you choose who your leadership group is, and he's not included, I think that, you're certainly not getting rid of a guy who shows up every single day, or you at least don't think you're getting rid of a guy who shows up every single day, ready to go, goes by example and is pretty cost effective. So that's certainly a head scratcher, but, their loss is somebody else's gain, and we'll be curious to see where he ends up next.
No doubt. I mean, coming out of the draft for the Jets, I mean, I think I'm pretty fired up about the guys they picked in the first round. I mean, I didn't know a lot about McGroarty, but, watching some of the tape, and maybe as impactful as just listening to him talk and seeing the energy that he brings to the team, I think that was probably a big reason, especially when you look at the type of team the Jets were last year looking forward. I mean, every team would love to have a guy like that. And obviously, if he can contribute and score at a high level in the National Hockey League, I mean, you've got a good one. And then the risk on Brad Lambert, I mean, a guy that came in as the number 3 overall selection, was playing with men, maybe a bit of a difficult situation for being somebody that young. The potential to hit a home run late in the first round, certainly there with Lambert. And, we traveled day off. I mean, when was the last time you heard a general manager speak afterwards saying, it didn't go well for us? That just simply doesn't happen. But I do think that there's some reason to be pretty excited about the 2 young men that heard their name called in the first round by the Jets on the weekend.
Well, look, some people are going to look at this and say, okay, yeah, sure. But this guy who, I'd been talking with, longtime NHL consultant and scout, sent me that text. I tweeted it out that day about Rutger McGroarty. And look, the Jets might have got their guy. You know what I mean? They might have, I think you can make that argument. This guy was high on him from the beginning. He's like, this is who they like. This is the kind of tenacity they need. And like I said in my tweet, he said, he's like, make it known that Rutger is a physical power forward that plays the same as Keith Tkachuk, that is better without the puck, incredible shot, and will absolutely be a pain to play against. Many scouts had him as their number 1 or 2 must-have. That can be the steal of the draft. So if any of that is true or all of that is true, it looks like the Jets have a good player on their hands. And so, we'll see what happens. I know, I'm not nearly as emotionally invested in these picks, so I can, certainly, wait and see what comes of, not just their first, round picks, but all of them. But I know fans were, a little bit shell shocked. It felt a little like Mark Scheifele back in 2011, where, this guy was high up on some boards, but, was in second round for a couple other people's mock drafts. And so I think this was always going to be an interesting draft, just given what happened previous years with COVID and the OHL having their season wiped out, and guys stock either falling or rising depending on how much hockey you were able to play in the last little while. And so that set everyone's kind of draft boards a little bit all over the place and in comparison. So I just think with this guy here, that's, if that's the scouting report on this guy, that he's a big power forward, he's nasty in front of the net. He's good away from the puck. He's good with the puck. He's got an incredible shot. He's going to be a pesky player to play against. I think that's exactly the kind of player the Winnipeg Jets need, and haven't drafted, I think most importantly for years.
No, exactly. And, he has that Kachuk energy. I mean, he certainly gave off sort of a Matthew and Brady vibe when he was talking about him. We're looking forward to having him coming up on the show soon as well here on Winnipeg Sports Talk, so people can look forward to that. So here we are, 48 hours or so, less than from free agency. How do you think the Jets tackle this? I mean, is there any obvious spots that they'll be looking for, or is free agency more about, to your point, teams that don't get what they want on the open market, opening up opportunities for Kevin Cheveldayoff to make some deals involving players that are under contract to the Jets right now?
Yeah, that's kind of my vibe heading into this one. It's less, Winnipeg, it hasn't really, I guess last summer was the summer of Chevy. That didn't really work out as planned with, of course, getting Nate Schmidt and Brendan Dillon. I don't see a big splash unless they can get players back for what they're, but the big splash will be on who leaves, right? I mean, that's the big thing here, is to identify what Rick Bowness needs out of a team to play that more defensive style. There's also, needing to, if you will, fix the culture that we've been talking about for years now, whether that's, shipping out Blake Wheeler. There's been, certainly some guys who have expressed, like a Pierre-Luc Dubois, that he wants to go to free agency in 2 years' time. Now, if I'm the Winnipeg Jets, unless he's telling me, unless he's doubling down on it and you're very, very clear, I think you're trying to take the opportunity that you have with, Mark Scheifele and Pierre-Luc Dubois and convince Pierre-Luc Dubois why he should stay here, why he was so happy at times, being a Winnipeg Jet. So we'll see what happens. I think there's definitely potential. We've heard the names, whether it's Blake Wheeler, whether it's Brendan Dillon, who have been on, potential trade blocks. Those are key pieces. Could be either shed to a certain point or could bring back players depending on what joins them. So we'll see what happens here. I think it's rounding out to be a very interesting one. We still need the Jets still need to hire the rest of their coaching staff. There's still lots of things to do and players to talk to, and Rick Bowness has his hands full. So we'll see what happens here, but it should be, if it's not a lot of players coming in or coming out, it should be an exciting week nonetheless.
Hey, before we go, I want to ask you about two players that are scheduled to hit unrestricted free agency, both in the top 10 of our buddy Frank Saravelli's list. Andrew Kopp, Evander Kane. What do you see happening with those individuals? What sort of money and term will be out there? And is there any teams specifically with Kopp that you're hearing that he might be linked to if he doesn't stay in the Big Apple?
I don't have him linked to anybody. I'll be honest with you. Haven't really doing my homework on Andrew Kopp. I mean, I know, we know he likes the U.S. We know that he, there were times over the last season or two with COVID that, he was very vocal about, not wanting to play in Canada and how stressful it was to play in Canada. And that's to his own right. But here's the other thing. He also wanted to sign long-term with the Winnipeg Jets. So what would, if under the right circumstances, under the right money, I mean, can you really rule him out of Winnipeg as an option? I mean, I don't see why you should. I mean, I'm not suggesting that he's, he's definitely coming here, but they've shown him, he's kind of has a weird, I don't want to call it a love-hate relationship because I don't want to put words in his mouth, because I don't think he hates this organization. I think the organization respects him despite some of the moves they've made in the past, like, ignoring him over last summer and ultimately pushing him out the door saying, we're not going to sign you. And then obviously we know, earlier in his career being that healthy scratch in the playoff game, and that stuck with him for a while. You know what I mean? Like that wasn't whatever. But in between all of that, I mean, the Jets are obviously Andrew Kopp is responsible for his own play and his progression as an NHLer. But you don't get that without the opportunity the Jets have given you. And the Jets made him, a triple threat. They played him on the power play. They played him on the penalty kill. They obviously played him even strength. He was that utility piece that was very, very valuable. So if you're the Winnipeg Jets, or I'd argue anybody in the National Hockey League, you want a guy like Andrew Kopp on your team. So it'd be interesting to see what his feelings are about a reunion with Winnipeg. We'll see what if Winnipeg's interested in reaching back out to him and giving him that payday that he's probably lining up for. But I also look at last season, and Andrew Kopp probably didn't have a lot of fun, and then went to the Big Apple and had a ton of fun. So, I don't know if his efforts are going to try to get back with New York or go somewhere else, but certainly a guy I think would benefit any team's pickup. But I don't have any, lists of teams that, he might be going to or coveting him. But,
the Jets will the Jets be calling Evander's agent on Wednesday?
Yeah, I'm going to go with a hard no. And I would double down and say that, Evander Kane's probably blocked Kevin Cheveldayoff's number or any 204 number from coming through his phone. So I don't even know if he'd get the calls. That would obviously be his agent's work. I doubt it. I mean, Evander Kane, there's no denying he had a great playoff run to us, with the Edmonton Oilers, and did what he's done in the past, where he's been on an expiring deal and plays out of his skates. And
it might be one of the best rehab stints in NHL history, if you really want to talk about it.
Well, it's very much like what we saw in San Jose. When he went to San Jose and he lit it up in the playoffs and then signed a big deal. And then when he signed a big deal and got comfortable, he reverted back to his old tendencies where, he just seems to get in trouble in the worst situations, and then ultimately is despised by his teammates. Is he a different human being? I don't know. I have no idea. I don't talk to him. He doesn't text me about what he's been up to get better in life. And so, I mean, I think he's a guy that, he's a bit of a risk. He certainly is. Now, he's also a very unique player. I mean, and that's, I don't know. There's going to be teams out there that are not going to want to touch him with a 10-foot pole just based on, the backlash. And, there's going to be a lot of teams that look at what he did over the last few months and want him on their team badly. And you only need one team that's willing to pay you top dollar, because you look at the reports coming out of Edmonton, and I think Edmonton needs to be smart. I mean, did Evander Kane become this solid hockey player because of his unique skill set? Or did he become a solid hockey player again because he played with some of the best players in the world on a line? And so, it's probably a bit of both. So you need to figure out, what you can afford. And I think if you're Evander Kane, you look at what you were able to do in Edmonton and maybe take a little less on the market and hopefully sign another contract and clean up your act, or go somewhere else for higher money and try to be, try to just not get in trouble. It's a fascinating thing. I think Evander Kane is a unique player on and off the ice. And with unique players comes unique challenges. And I think if you're an NHL team, you need to weigh out what you want in your locker room and what you think Evander Kane can bring to your hockey team. That's the most diplomatic answer I can give you.
Yeah. Well, no, you're right. I mean, listen, there is a major risk in giving Evander Kane big money in big term. Shorter term, I think most teams would be willing to take the chance on it, based on what happened last year in Edmonton. But I mean, if he's looking at $6+ million for 5-6+ years, that's going to eliminate a lot of teams that, will not want to get into a situation that the San Jose Sharks are still dealing with, as we haven't had clarity on the termination of his contract last season. Just one thing on Kopp, and I know a lot of people are thinking that he's going back to the Rangers. Chris Drury does not want to hamstring himself when they get to Wednesday. We've heard Nazem Kadri potentially a target, and if they go and get Kadri, maybe the money isn't there to sign Andrew Kopp. It sounds like Ryan Strome's probably already going to market. And one of the teams that I know Elliot and Merrick were talking about was the Nashville Predators. And the Predators, got their guy. They maintained Philip Forsberg, who signed an 8-year extension to stay in Music City. And they had said the Predators could very well be in on Copp. And I would suggest that a team like Nashville, playing in the Central Division for so long against the Winnipeg Jets, would be very aware at just how versatile a player Copp is. And then, of course, everyone saw what he was able to do on that great playoff run during his short time in New York.
Yeah, I mean, I just echo the same things I said about Andrew Copp. I think there's a lot of teams, if not every team, that would use him. And I think the beauty about having an Andrew Copp on your team is, he can contribute in a lot of different ways. So, if there's some players out there that, you rely on their offense, you rely on their offensive production. So if they're not scoring a point, 2 points a night, you're not getting their value, or you're not getting what you need from them. Whereas with Andrew Copp, he might not fill the net every night. He has been known to score, so he certainly can chip in. He can be your defensive specialist. He can be your shutdown guy. He can be your top penalty killer. He can contribute on the power play. So there's all these different ways that Andrew Copp can do good things for your team. And so that's what makes him so, that's what makes him so coveted by other teams, is just, again, that versatility. But, maybe there's some teams that just don't know Andrew Copp as well, right? There's some teams that are getting to know him a bit better. And certainly with the Nashville Predators, having played against Andrew in the Central Division, know exactly how difficult he is to play against, know exactly where he can play on the ice. And so I'm not surprised at all that he's being linked there. And I'm sure, he's going to be a fascinating guy to see, because I think he's going to have enough suitors to, where a team's going to maybe overpay for him a little bit. And whether or not he's chasing the money or chasing situation, because we've seen, if you look at what Andrew Copp was able to do in Winnipeg, and credit to him too. I shouldn't say that the Jets just put him in success to do well, but they did, and they gave him opportunity. And then you go over to New York and you play with a guy like Artemi Panarin, and you play well. That's a guy who can play with stars. That's a guy who can play on your bottom line. So when I say bottom, I mean that third line checking role, if that's what your team does. But Andrew Copp, all the credit to him. Came in as a guy who was always confident in his own skill set. He was pissed off when he was that healthy scratch years ago on that playoff run, because he has that, he has that confidence in him. And you're going to get a great player. I think the only thing that maybe is a knock, if you will, to Andrew is as he's suffered some injuries over the last few years, and maybe something that you need to keep an eye on, particularly concussion issues. But he proved over the playoffs that he, was more than sturdy and ready to go. And like I said, if it's not with the Winnipeg Jets, he's the kind of guy that I would, that I hope does well wherever he ends up.
Hey, Hammer, just before we go, I've got to ask you about Eric Comrie. He still doesn't have a deal. Is he going to be going to market? And, considering the scarcity of goaltending right now, should the Jets be worried that they may have to go to a plan B for a backup behind Connor Hellebuck?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that, certainly an area the team, I think, has been kind of overshadowed everything else that's been going on over the last little while. So, I think it's one of those things that Eric Comrie is extremely happy in Winnipeg. I think he certainly enjoys Wade Flaherty. And so him coming back is a key piece to maybe him re-signing at a nice base NHL salary. He might also look for a better opportunity somewhere else, maybe a bit more money. But I think it would have to be somewhat significant for him to want to leave Winnipeg. And I'm assuming Winnipeg wants to, would want to bring him back if they're under a very similar situation as last season, where they were up against the cap, that they have some room and they can, bring in a better goaltender, a more proven, more experienced goaltender. I think that's something they should consider. But I thought Eric Comrie, for the work that he did last season, is a solid number two. Proved that last year, and I think he should be given the chance to continue to prove that this season. Let's see if a deal can get made here.
Hammer, great stuff. What's coming up this week for you? You're back on Bombers. I can't wait for this game on Friday night. I was really hyped up for Saturday, and now I'm even more ready to get to the field on Friday night. Of course, free agency, little Bombers, little Jets, and all in the Free Press.
Yeah, Bombers, Jets mixed in with a little bit of work behind the scenes that I do for other projects, but going to be a busy week. I got 4 days off leading into today, so I'm back at it. Feels good to be back and got a whole week's worth of stuff, and that is going to be a big game. Bo Levi Mitchell is becoming Bo Levi Mitchell again, and so that's I'm anticipating a solid affair coming up here Friday as the Bombers try to go to 6-0.
Thanks for the chat, pal. Always love having you on.
Always a pleasure, my man. Shout out to the Commodores as usual.
There it is. Jeff K. Hamilton on Twitter. Give him a follow if you haven't already, and make sure to check out all of his coverage this week in the pages of the Winnipeg Free Press. All right, we got to get Remis back in here. Hey, do want to give a big cheers to our friends over at Little Brown Jug. A great weekend for everyone that went out to the Folk Fest. And I know a lot of people were loving the new Winnipeg Folk Fest, or the Folk Fest lager put together by Little Brown Jug. The Folk Fest might be over, but the beer is still available for you. Pick up it and all your Little Brown Jug favorites at your favorite local beer store, or better yet, go on down to the brewery and tap room on William Avenue. Sample your favorites, pick up everything you need, and of course, you can also order online with citywide delivery at littlebrownjug.ca. We will get to our Assiniboia Downs picks before we're finished up, and very much looking forward to welcoming our winners from our Pick 6 contest a couple weeks ago tomorrow night to the Downs. Hope everyone comes hungry. That world-class prime rib buffet is going to be on the menu for all of our winners and their guests. And I think it's race number 3. We will be heading down into the winner's circle for the Winnipeg Sports Talk featured race. So really looking forward to that. And again, even if you're not, even if you weren't one of our winners, if you're thinking about a great time to go out, do it on Tuesday. We'll look forward to seeing everyone out at Assiniboia Downs. We'll get to our picks in a minute. And of course, our Coolbet picks as well. But I do want to thank our friends at Canadian Club. And just thinking about the CC and Ginger is making me more excited for Friday night. Was at the game, the last home game, and at the loge beside where I was sitting with our friends from Princess Auto, there was a crew absolutely crushing CC and Gingers throughout the program. And again, those Jim Beam social passes will get you a free one as well if you haven't tried it. So this Friday, Canadian Club will be flowing. The CC and Gingers will be available. And of course, Canadian Club is the official spirit and sponsor of your Winnipeg Blue Bombers. CC and Gingers available at beer stores around the city. And the LC's the place to go. Manitoba Liquor Marts for all your favorite Canadian Club products and the CC and Ginger. All right, let's quickly get these Coolbet lines up today. I always like doing this on Monday in particular because we get a good idea of the lines early on in the week for the Canadian Football League. And here's the way things are looking right now. Thursday night football, it's the Elks at the Montreal Alouettes. Sounds like Taylor Cornelius is going to be starting for the Elks. What a situation they have there in green and gold. And the Alouettes with Danny Machocha making his first start, I guess, as the head coach this season, taking over for the fired Kahari Jones. Alouettes a 6.5-point home favorite. The Bombers have opened as 4-point favorites against the Calgary Stampeders in the Battle of Unbeatens. Bombers minus 200 on the money line and 4-point favorites in the game. The Saskatchewan Roughriders are 3-point favorites on the road against the Toronto Argonauts. That game, an afternoon game on Saturday. And actually, we got a doubleheader on Saturday in the afternoon. A little later on, Ottawa and Hamilton, the something's got to give game. Someone will win. Well, I guess there could be a tie. That would be quite funny. But Hamilton, 4.5-point favorites at home against Ottawa. I guess the big question, Remo, for the Ottawa Redblacks is how they move forward without their top quarterback, Jeremiah Masoli, as we talked about earlier, was taken on a dirty hit at the hands of the Saskatchewan Roughriders. Good thing is he doesn't need surgery, but he's still going to be out 10 to 12 weeks, which means that Ottawa is really going to be up against it without a win on the season.
Yeah, and remember Ottawa's season last year where they didn't have a quarterback. Caleb Evans is their backup. I figured he's going to be the starter, so I was ready to lay the points with Ottawa. Then I remembered that Masoli had that injury. And, I mean, been rough go. I thought Ottawa was a lot better than their record indicated, but I think their last, they kind of been declining since those 2 games against the Bombers. Maybe I lean Hamilton there. Edmonton, I mean, they're terrible when they have Cornelius at quarterback. Like, how many quarterbacks have they used this year? It's not going well for them. The game of the week is the Calgary-Winnipeg on Friday. Although Saskatchewan-Toronto will be interesting. Saskatchewan, they're on a bit of a hot streak. I don't think Toronto has been that great, even though they won the division last year. Does anyone remember that?
They pushed the Bombers to the limit.
Yeah, and they got the win against the Bombers too last year. So
the only team to legitimately beat Zach Collaros as a starting quarterback in the CFL with the Bombers.
MBT's got the Bombers number. He always throws for a lot of yards against the Bombers. So I guess those two games. I like the Saturday doubleheader when it's Saturday evening and then the late Saturday game.
I'm with you on that.
This is the afternoon Toronto game and then Ottawa Hamilton. Then like Saturday night, like what do I do when there's no late CFL? It sucks.
Watch highlights, PVR it, and then watch it afterwards.
Sometimes there's a fight. There's fights on Saturday, so I watch those. But I like the Saturday evening tilt because baseball on Saturday, they always have afternoon games. So someone's got to take up the calendar there.
Hey, while we're on Coolbet, fire over to NHL because my guy Pat Gregoire just hit me up today, and they've got some free agency wagers for you, folks. Here are your options. Where will Evander Kane play game 1 of the 2022-2023 season? Edmonton is even money. Calgary and Anaheim and Coyotes. Coyotes? What? And the Washington Capitals all plus 550. Kraken and Buffalo 8-1. As if Buffalo is going to be getting Evander Kane back after the way he finished up there. Surprised the Jets aren't on that thing at about 1,000,000-1. So you got Evander Kane options. Johnny Gaudreau. Where will Johnny play game 1 of the season? Calgary is still the favorite at plus 125. Jersey plus 250. Seattle plus 250. And the Philadelphia Flyers plus 450. I think Philly would love to get him, but with all the moves that Chuck Fletcher's made, I'm not sure they've got the money right now to do it. And what that would mean as far as getting rid of players on the roster to be able to offer Johnny Hockey a $9 or $10 million contract, I think remains to be seen. You've got odds on Evgeny Malkin, Pittsburgh, minus 135. Then the Ducks and the Kraken at plus 650. Rangers, Caps, and Stars at 8-1. Jesse Puljujarvi, Edmonton Oilers, minus 200, or any other team, plus 125. That's interesting. Everyone's sort of been reporting that it seems likely that Puljujarvi will be traded, so maybe there's some value there in the plus 125. Other options, John Klingberg, Carolina Hurricanes are the favorite there. Darcy Kemper, Washington Capitals, minus 161. There has been rumors that they've already been talking, and he looks like he'll be going to Washington, so take that for what it's worth. Leafs next up at plus 275. And then Jack Campbell and Edmonton, minus 169. That's moved significantly since it opened earlier on today. And I guess the other thing, you've also got odds on Claude Giroux and Nazem Kadri. And I'll tell you what, Remo, I am very interested as to how the goaltending carousel works out. I don't hear a lot of excited Leaf fans with the reports that Matt Murray might be close to being traded from Ottawa to Toronto.
Yeah, and Big Guy asked, are the Jets listed anywhere on this odd board? And no, the answer is no. As far as the goalie carousel, I don't know why any team's looking to get Matt Murray. Maybe you look at his 2 Stanley Cups and think you can bring back that magic, but you look at his play the last couple of seasons, doesn't exactly scream Stanley Cup playoff starter. So I don't know what Toronto's doing. I think Kemper and Campbell, will one go to the Oilers, one go to the Leafs. Will the Oilers finally fix their goaltending? So we've been talking about this for years. They signed Mike Smith to that 2-year deal last year. Koskinen got the 3-year deal a couple of years ago. It was Peter Chiarelli's parting gift. So we'll see about the goalie carousel. Is there any other team? Husso went to Detroit. Georgiev signed with Colorado over the weekend. I don't know. I'm curious about those.
Yeah, well, that'll certainly be a focus for us on Wednesday, along with all of the players on the market. And obviously, we'll see what the Winnipeg Jets do, if anything, in free agency. Of course, all those numbers are up at coolbet.com. Click on the NHL tab and then on free agency, and you'll see it all there. And if you've never bet at Coolbet before, use the promo code WST for a 100% bonus on your first deposit up to $200. All right, Remo, let's get to our horse racing picks. Tomorrow, we'll be there live, chowing on some prime rib and being in the winner's circle for our WST race. But tonight, we've got some selections to make. I've got mine in here, so why don't I will start this off. Race number 2, I'm going with a 2-3 Quinella. The horses being double-barreled elite. and Big Energy.
That's a good name. Big Energy.
I agree. I'm doing another $5 Quinella in race number 4. Horses 1 and 3 back in that action, and Don't Get Smart. And then we're going over to race number 6. And race number 6, we're going to go $4 on number 1 to win. That is Pray for Peace with Antonio Whitehall on the ride. And then I'm going to go with a 168 triactor box. So Pray for Peace, Great Escape, and Brody's Streak. Those are my selections for tonight. Let's start this off with some wins this week and get some momentum going into tomorrow. What do you got?
Yeah,
for us
I need a winner. I haven't won. And Rob Noakes in chat is saying, watch out for this Pray for Peace horse. 80,000 claim at Churchill. So
Pray for Peace. Oh, good. That's the one that I bet on.
Yeah,
right on, Noakes. Yes, that's the reinforcement I need from the chat right now with these picks.
He's saying this Pray for Peace is a big deal horse. That's what he's saying. Let's go with my picks. I haven't won for a while. I need to get something going.
Slump Buster right here, right before we go and make the big money.
Okay, couple winners. I have this horse to win. Royal Commando. Love the name. $5 to win on Royal Commando. That's race 2. Race 7, I'm picking a horse 3 to win. Yola, because YOLO, has $5 to win on Yola. And then I got a $10 Quinella, race 4. Finish first and second, any order. Don't Get Smart and Kick a Little Booty. Those are my picks.
Beautiful. You can use HPIBet.com if you want to wager on Assiniboia Downs and tracks around the world. And, of course, if you're not able to get out for the live racing tonight, throw a curtain stretch up on the AS Downs YouTube channel, and you can watch it. And follow them on Twitter as well. There are a lot of people, as the signal continues to grow, there are a lot of sharp horse racing people that seem to be playing Assiniboia Downs and tweeting out their picks. I wish those tweets came in before we made our picks, but it has been great to see. And Remo, tomorrow, thank you, Bombers. Got a big stack of 20s here ready to go for tomorrow's racing. I'm most looking forward to for dinner, but then hopefully we're saving the biggest wins of the year for live in person with our guests and the winners of the Pick 6 contest.
Yeah, that'll be fun. So we're going for the buffet, but we will be there after for the horse racing and race 3. We will be in the winner's circle. That's the Winnipeg Sports Talk race?
So even if you pop out and you're not up in the dining room, pop on out. We'll head down there before and afterwards. So if you want to hook up with some of the gang, end of race 3, we'll run down to the winner's circle, and we'd love to see you all out there at Assiniboia Downs. And I imagine there'll be a lot of talk about free agency, which of course is going to be coming up, and we'll fill you in tomorrow a little bit more on what our plans are for Wednesday. But I think there's a very good chance we'll be doing an extended show starting earlier with everything getting underway at 11 a.m. So likely a start in between 11 and noon. And we'll take it at least till 3 o'clock, depending on what's happening with the Winnipeg Jets. And I would imagine at some point we'll probably hear from Kevin Shoveldayoff as well, and we'll make sure we try and have that for you live as well here on TSN 1290. Well, great show today. We will look. I'm disappointed we didn't get Shane today. It might have been a little bit of a wires crossed there, but we will have him on at some point in the next few days to talk about all of the selections that the Winnipeg Jets had. And I don't want to promise this for sure, but I think there's a chance that the Jets' first of 2 first-round selections, Rucker McGroarty, will be joining us tomorrow, hopefully, but at some point this week on the show. So looking forward to making that happen. You do not want to miss that. Right on. Well, anyways, great show today. Awesome numbers, folks. Don't forget, if you haven't already, hit that red subscribe button. It's completely free. Certainly, it'll get our content into your YouTube feed as soon as it's available. And you might want to hit the turn your notifications on to make sure that if we do start early, when we likely do on Wednesday, you'll know that we're live and can jump in and not miss any of Winnipeg Sports Talk. But as you know, it's always there for you, even if you can't join us on time on YouTube and on the podcast. It's there for you Monday to Fridays afternoons here on WST. Big thanks to Jeff Hamilton for hanging out, and everyone that stopped in today on the program. was an awesome weekend. So much fun talking about that Bomber win. Lots of intrigue heading into free agency for the Winnipeg Jets and much, much more. Have yourself a great night tonight. We'll see you back here tomorrow, 1 p.m. on Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. Thanks for being with us.
Oh, my God. Oh! Shut it down. Let's go home.
Thanks for tuning in to Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast feed at winnipegsportstalk.com.